Good morning. Welcome to this week's of solidifying what we've read this last week and putting it into the meta narrative. Now, one of the things that I looked at this week as we looked at the whole reading for the week is I understood and saw that bitterness is a terrible motivator. So we're introduced to a couple people who exemplify why this is so true, that bitterness is a terrible motivator. We're introduced to Absalom. Now, what do we know from last week? That Absalom has been involved in taking the life of his brother to bring about vengeance for the rape of his sister, and as a result of that, he's banished from the kingdom. He is finally restored by the counsel of Joab to King David, but still he doesn't have access to his father. So what do we see? That as he acts out of bitterness is that he commits treachery against David. And David winds up fleeing for his life from the city of Jerusalem. And we see that Absalom eventually is defeated and he dies. So what do we see? He never moves beyond his bitterness. We also see Ahithophel. Now, who is Ahithophel? Ahithophel is Bathsheba's grandfather. And when we put that detail together and we understand why does he can't offer the counsel that he offers during this period to David about remaining in Jerusalem. Why? Because he has an axe to grind. His granddaughter's been violated by his own king. And as a result of his counsel not being followed, he goes and commits suicide. So what do you see about Ahithophel? He is trapped in his bitterness. He has never moved on from the rape of his daughter. So then we also see about David. David could be bitter. I mean, David has had a lot of opportunity to develop roots of bitterness throughout his life, running from King Saul and so on. But he isn't. So as we think about this, why does he move beyond bitterness? Because David understands worship. Listen to what he says in Psalm 3, verse 1 through 4. Lord, how they have increased to trouble me. Many are they who rise up against me. Many are they, say of him, there is no help for him in God. But you, O Lord, you are a shield for me, my glory, and the one who lifts my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from out of his holy hill. Also, Psalm 63, verse 1 through 3. O Lord, O God, you are my God. Early will I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh longs for you in a dry and thirsty land where there is no water. So I've looked for you in the sanctuary to see your power and your glory. Because if your loving kindness is better than life, my lips shall praise you. So what do you discover about David? The reason David is not trapped in bitterness of the past is because he is a worshiping dude. He knows how to deal with his despair, acknowledge it for what it is, and then move beyond his despair to hope in the living God. You also see in our reading that David mourns over the loss of Absalom. You see also that you have a rebellion by the Benjamites led by Sheba, a revolt. You have a Psalm 7 now reflecting, again, in the midst of all that's going on, that David has hope in the midst of the brokenness of life. He makes this statement in this psalm, let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end, but establish the just. Why? Because he understands there's hope in the living God. So he is not trapped in bitterness. You see that he sings to the Lord. Listen to this statement in 2 Samuel chapter 22. You have given me the shield of your salvation. Your gentleness has made me great. You enlarged my path under me so that my feet did not slip. Wow, why he has a heart after God is because David knows how to worship. He knows how to move beyond despair and bitterness. You see also in his life, towards the end of his life, he, against wise counsel, numbers all of his mighty men. He does a census, and as a result of the census, 70,000 men in Israel perish. Wow, what has happened here? You also see that at the end of his life, he spends the remainder of his life accumulating all the materials that King Solomon would need to build the temple. And so what does this teach us about bitterness, about what's going on here? That bitter people stop living. Bitter people never move on. It defines them. But worship is what turns a bitter person to a person who has gratitude. What you see is always too early to assess your failures. Absalom, Amnon, Tamar, the senses of military might and so on. But it's always too early to assess your successes because he has had military victories, decisive defeat of the Philistines. He's experienced tremendous times of peace. He avenges the Gibeonites over the fact that God had made, Joshua had made a covenant with the Gibeonites back in the Judges era, and King Saul had violated that. And so David rectified that wrong. So what you see here is that it's always too early to assess your failures, and it's always too early to assess your success. And why is this so important? Because we always make assessments about other people and about ourselves, and we don't get to do that in our lifetime. Because what happens here with David, we're still reading about his life. We're still benefiting from learning from his failures and learning from his successes. And so the assessment will not be over till that day, till we have all redeemed the value from his failures and his success. Finally, what you see here is a singular success or a singular failure shouldn't define anyone. So David experiences both, but he is defined by his hope in the living God. No wonder David, not Saul, is the metric for all the kings that follow. He was not a bitter man because he chose to worship the living God. He did not succumb to despair. Why? Because he says, cast your cares upon him. Peter picks this up. He says, oh, my soul, why are you cast down? Hope in the living God. So in order to dispel bitterness and to dispel despair, you have to be a person who worships.